Hello Techlinks. In this video, I'll be showing you how to use the Take Ansible performance testing repo to conduct performance tests that will test your Take environment as well as compare against some of our competitors such as Kong and Apollo. Alright, first of all, we need to have Ansible installed locally. We will then clone this repo and run the initialization script that will initialize the default values for us. We will then set the machine addresses in the host.yaml. Those machine addresses will be based on our AWS machines. And as you can see, I have gone to my AWS console and I'm now creating my 5 machines that I require to run this test. So what I will do here is I will select Ubuntu, I will select the type of the machine that I want to run these tests on, and I will hit launch. And as you can see, now I have 5 machines that have been stood up for me to use for performance testing. So I'll go back to my host.yaml now, and I can copy paste the addresses of these machines into my file. Now, as you can see, I also have the Ansible user, the Ansible SSH private key file variables here. So those will be used to access the machine, so make sure you have the appropriate values in there for your setup. So now that we added all the required variables in our host.yaml, I'm going to jump into the console and I'm going to type in sudo ansible-playbook playbook.yaml, and I'm going to select 3 different tags here. I'm going to provide the install tag, the standup tag, and the test tag. We also have the cleanup tag, which will help you clean up the instances, but as you can see, all those commands are representative of what they do. Now, you will see that I require sudo and a password here. The reason for that is the EC2 machine has to, or Ansible has to have access to your local host so that it can bring those files that are generated through performance tests and dump them on your local machine. So while the tests are running, let's talk about the initialization script. So what's really happening here is that we are copying some example files into the files that Ansible will be looking at, and we're also using the Ansible Galaxy to install our different packages that we require. Now, if we go under our vars, we can see all those values that were created. We can look at the example files. Now, the reason I'm not showing you my actual files is because I have some secrets in there. So, and here is the test.yaml, and this is really important. This is what actually dictates what tests are run. Now, you can override some of these with environment variables, which I will show you later. But as you can see, we have a query type, which can be REST, stitch, or federate. We have query depth. We have the GraphQL query itself, so you can overwrite the actual query, you can limit by the cores, you can have authentication, or enable authentication, enable analytics, enable rate limiting, and last but not least, you can also dictate which services you want to test against, so you can leave that as empty if you just want to test Take, but you could also add Kong or Apollo. Now, lastly, we have this prefix option, which I will show you in a little bit. Now we can take a look back at the script, and we can see that some of the tests now are being generated under the benchmarks folder. So if we take a look, we can see the RPS and the P99 for the upstream, for Take, and for Kong, and you can compare all these values against each other. Now that we saw the tests and some results, what we will do is we'll go ahead and clean this instance up. So we'll go ahead and clean the machines up. We'll also turn them off and terminate them on AWS. And what I'm going to show you next is a way to automate this whole process so that we don't have to go through the hassle of creating the machines ourselves every time and all that. So the idea here is that this Ansible playbook, or this repo, has multiple Ansible playbooks, and some can be used to launch EC2 instances, Azure instances or GCP instances. So there are 3 different playbooks, one for each one of these clouds, and each of them have their own documentation. You can see that each of them requires specific information about that environment so that Ansible can connect to it and generate these machines. So let's go ahead and open up the AWS documentation page, and we're gonna just grab the example that we have in there. And I'm just gonna set up the markdown to be bash just so we can see some color on this. And what I'm gonna do here is, first of all, if you can see, this is how you can set up the test variables as environment variables. So you can pass them as a JSON through the eFlag. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a sleep between when we create the machines, because sometimes AWS takes a few seconds. So I'll do a sleep for a couple of minutes before the machine is created. Then I actually run the tests on Kong and Tyke 3 times. So there'll be a test for each run, and those will be rest tests. So now that we're running some tests on AWS, let's also grab the example for GCP. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste it, I'm going to modify it, and what we're going to be running here is we're going to be comparing Tyke against itself with different plugins enabled, and that's going to run on GCP. And last but not least, we'll also take a look at Azure, and we'll grab the example that we have here at Azure, and we'll modify it. And this time we're actually going to be comparing Tyke against Apollo, and we will run these tests against different depths with Tyke versus Apollo. And we'll go ahead and run these, and as you can see right now, we have completely automated the testing on 3 different clouds. So I can let that run in the background, and I will have some tests being generated and under the benchmarks in a few minutes. Now, while we wait for these tests to be generated, let's take a look at what's under the host folder. And as you can see, these are all the different machines that were generated by these different Ansible playbooks. So what I'm going to do next is let's SSH into the AWS Tyke box that we're running tests on, and let's actually look at the CPU and RAM consumption as we run the test. So as we can see, the test is about to start, and we should be able to see, right now we can see that the CPU and RAM usage just jumped up to indicate that the test is running. And as you can see, it went down now that the test is completed. So we can see that the tests are fully consuming the CPU. We are pushing the gateway to the limit, and that's exactly what we wanted to make sure we have. Alright, so once all the tests are complete, I can now go to my benchmarks folder. I can look at all the tests under, whether they're GraphQL or REST, and I should have all the results in there.